This video is on factoring quadratics by grouping. Factoring by grouping uses the concept of GCF, that's greatest common factor, over and over again, so we really need to be great at it. Let's review GCF a little bit. We'll begin with the problem 15x squared plus 9. What we want to do is factor this using GCF, so we're going to look for the greatest common factor. First with the numbers, and then, if it applies, with the variables as well. If you look at 15 and 9, I hope you notice that the number that divides evenly into both of them is 3, and that is the greatest common factor that I can find. If I divide 3 out of both of these factors, what I'll be left with goes in the parentheses after the 3. So the GCF always goes in front, and what's left when you divide it away goes in the parentheses. In the parentheses, we end up with 5x squared plus 3. You should notice that to check this, you can always distribute this 3 back to everything in the parentheses. 3 times 5x squared is 15x squared. And 3 times 3 is positive 9. That should always work, and if it doesn't, it indicates that you did something incorrectly. For this next one, when we look at it carefully, we see that it has a 2 in common, and so we put a 2 and we open our parentheses. It's important to remember that it doesn't just disappear, and I used this one on purpose because the first fraction reduces to 4x squared, but you can't just cancel this away. 2 over 2 has a value. It's equal to 1, and so you have to put that plus 1 here. Otherwise, if this didn't exist, you'd never get back to the original when you checked your answer. Remember, 2 times 4x squared is 8x squared. And 2 times positive 1 is where this plus 2 can come back from. If we didn't have it, we'd never get that plus 2 back. The last example looks a little more complicated, but remember that terms are separated by plus and minus. And so this is one big term, and this is another big term. And the GCF, what they have in common, is an expression instead of just a number or a variable or both. So in this case, what's in common is an entire expression, but I still work the same way. I put the GCF in front and I open up some parentheses so that after I divide it away, that x plus 5 gets divided away just like before with the 2 or the 3. And again, anything over itself will cancel. So x plus 5 over x plus 5 cancels. What we're left with is 4x minus 7. And that's what goes in the other set of parentheses. This is very important to be able to complete factoring by grouping. Let's take a look at the first type of factoring by grouping. Before we do, a quick reminder that we need standard form for quadratic equations. Standard form for a quadratic is ax squared plus bx plus c, where a, b, and c are all just numbers. Don't forget, if the middle term is missing, if this bx doesn't exist in the problem you're given, you can always replace it with a 0x and then follow all the steps that you're going to learn now. So to factor this, we're going to begin by drawing sort of a belt buckle up here above the middle term. And we're going to take this 2, which is the value of a, and this negative 15, the value of c, multiply them and put the answer in the belt buckle. The idea is we're looking for two numbers that multiply to the belt buckle, and those same two numbers have to add up to the value of b, the coefficient of the middle term, the negative 7. So we're going to look at all our choices for multiplying to negative 30. We'll ignore the negative for now. 30 times 1, 15 times 2, 5 times 6, 3 times 10. If we look at all of these, only one of the choices, if we use a negative carefully, can add up to negative 7. And it appears that if I take the 3 times 10 and I make the 10 negative, they'll multiply to negative 30 and they'll add up to negative 7. So that's exactly what we're going to use here. We're going to take that negative 7x and we're going to split it. And so we're going to make one of them a positive 3x and the other one a negative 10x. So we're splitting this middle term and we're going to just bring down the first term and the last term. And if you look carefully, you can sort of see that I have a pair of pants here, a belt buckle, one leg, and the other leg. So the way this works is that you're going to take each half of these, and it sort of makes a foot. Take the sign of the 10 with the second one. So these are kind of our feet. We're going to do GCF now to each of these. We're taking 2 terms at a time and we're going to find the GCF. If you look at the first two, the GCF is x. That's all that's in common between these two terms. And then I'm going to open my parentheses. When I divide x out of the first term, I'm left with 2x. And when I divide x out of the second term, I'm left with plus 3. We're going to do the same thing here, remembering that whatever our GCF is, you're going to write plus or minus with it. We're going to need it. So here I'm looking, and what's in common is negative 5. If it was a positive 5, it's important that you use plus 5 there, and you'll see why in a minute. I open my parentheses, and when I divide negative 5 away from this first piece, I end up carefully with a positive 2x, and here a positive 3. Now it's important for you to notice that these parentheses are always going to match, and if they don't, you've done something wrong, so you should look at them. This is exactly why we did that last example for GCF, because now we're going to do GCF again. And this time you know that your GCF is this expression, 2x plus 3. When you divide it, it goes away in each case, and what's left is what goes in the other set of parentheses. So the other set of parentheses is x minus 5. We can verify that our answer is correct by doing the box or the arrows and multiplying this back out. And you will see that we do get 2x squared minus 7x minus 15. I have one here for you to do. So if you would, pause the video now, follow the same steps, and try to do the same thing. One clue, don't forget that anything that you need to find the product of when you're doing your pairs of numbers, don't forget about the number times 1. It's an important choice. Okay, you should have had a chance to do that. And check your work, see if you got the same answer. If you didn't, go back and look. Now yours might be in the opposite order, so that's okay. You can have the 3x plus 1 first and the x plus 4 second. Any questions that you have, jot them down, and we'll talk about them together in class. So this time, the second method is called the box method. And again, this is still factoring by grouping. It's just visually organizing the work a little bit differently. So the start is the same. We're still going to do this belt buckle and figure out what goes in here. Notice that I'm doing the same problem. So we already know that to get negative 30, a negative 10 times a positive 3 worked. But here's the difference. We're not going to do pants. We're going to set up a box, just like you did when you were multiplying two sets of parentheses. But remember, this stuff was the stuff we pulled out of the boxes. So let's go ahead and fill in what we would have gotten. The 2x squared would have ended up here. And the negative 15 would have ended up here. These were the two boxes that we always got to add together as like terms to get this middle term. And so we're going to set those up on purpose using the negative 10x and a 3x. And so we're going to put those in here, and it doesn't matter which one goes where. So even if you choose to put the negative 10x here, but someone else chooses to put it here, your answers are going to come out the same. Here's the rule. GCF every row and column in this problem, in this box. So if we look at the first row here, our GCF is 2x. And if we look at the second row, our GCF is a positive 3. And we're going to use the positive. If we look at this first column, our GCF is just x in common. And in the second column, don't forget about a negative. Anytime the first box in the row or column you're looking at has a negative, you should use it in your GCF. And so here, negative 5 is in common. Well, this is where it's kind of neat because this is one set of parentheses and this is the other set of parentheses. And again, it doesn't matter which one you put first. So I kind of like the box personally, but it is up to you. The start is the same. You have to do the belt buckle every time. Now it's your turn. Go ahead and pause the video and try this one now on your own. All right, you should have had a chance, I hope, to do this, and I'm hoping successfully. In the end, you should have x plus 4, 2x minus 5. Don't forget the 2x minus 5 could have come first in this case, in any case that you do. See if you did make a mistake. See if you can find out where it is and what you did wrong. Write down any questions that you have. The summary is always look for a GCF first. We're going to have problems that you can make much easier if you first take a GCF out of the entire problem in standard form before you start with the whole belt buckle thing. Remember, pants or box is just different ways of visualizing, of seeing a method of factoring that's technically called grouping. So it's really up to you how you like to organize the work. Practice both methods, but then my suggestion is to pick one and stick with it. You can and should always check your answer by multiplying it back out, even if you just do that in your head.